Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another edition of Hilaal Live. I'm your host, Luqmaan Shadrach. Thanks for watching us on Channel 347 on DSTV. We continue this week's Mental Health Monday. We started our first episode last week about gender-based violence, and we're still within the 16 days of activism campaign. We're on the second last day, I think it is, and it's so vital to talk about such an important topic. Back in studio to give us a bit more insight into a very worrying condition in South Africa is clinical psychologist Brother Rafiq Lockhat. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back.
Assalam, and welcome to all the listeners. Hello.
Jazakallah so much for coming in once again and
Always
discussing.
a pleasure.
Last week was part one we identified. And for those that maybe didn't tune in last week, let's recap around the topic of gender-based violence.
We said South Africa has 5 times the global average of violence on women. And the stats from the Human Science Research Council, I think, shows that 60% of women die at the hands of an intimate partner.
Wow.
So the general perception is that it's a stranger. But no, that 6 out of 10 are murdered by the intimate partner, which makes sense because you have access.
Absolutely.
So,
but also it's that vulnerability.
It's the vulnerability.
And more important along with the vulnerability is maybe the complacency that this tends to be the norm, to a large extent. And the partner affected can become complacent in that regard as well.
I think complacent is a bit, I think more accepting.
Okay. Maybe that's a better word.
So this is my life.
Yeah.
It's not, but they begin to say, my mother had this, so this is my life. My granny had this is my life. And this is how it is. Of course, it shouldn't, and it doesn't have to be. But I think that's why shows like this are important. We bring it up, we talk about it in a way that then gives people like the sense of awareness of hang on. So this is not how it should be. No, it shouldn't.
Yeah.
So that's why these shows are important, I think.
Yeah. So what we normally do is share this episode onto our YouTube channel. And for our viewers that have access to our YouTube channel, please share the video. And, always copy me in luqmaan@hilaal.tv. If you have any questions, we'll refer them to Brother Rafiq. Maybe you are in a position that is affected by GBV. We can always get you some help as well, inshallah. But one of the questions I'd like to ask as well is when does normal become abusive? And that's what we're saying about the acceptance part.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's no relationship that's perfect, number one. Secondly, there are certain normal stresses and strains that happen in a relationship. People get angry, they get irritable, they have a bad day at work. Yeah. They come home, they ratty, they lose their temper. Okay, so these are normal things that happen in every relationship. So I want to just talk to our viewers and say, if somebody's having a normal day and they're upset about something, you can't suddenly say you're abusing me. Okay, but so the important thing about the anger is how it's expressed and the intention behind it.
Right, got it.
Right. So step one is we must just accept that both men and women get irritated. Both men and women get angry. Both men and women lose their temper. Both men and women get upset about stuff. This is normal life.
Yeah.
It's how that gets expressed. So if the husband walks in, he's angry and he kicks the door, okay, a bit over age there, but nobody got harmed. Okay, maybe the door broke, you had to pay some money. Right. But if that's a weekly occurrence or like daily occurrence, that's a problem because now it's not a one-off that every week they're going to buy a new door because he's punching the door in. You can be angry. But being angry and then smacking the person or smashing the plates or breaking the mirrors or throwing the table out because you had a bad day, and this happens regularly, that's a problem. It's gone off from a one-off thing. Sorry, I got fired and I banged the car and the taxi, whatever. Sorry, I apologize. And it will never happen again. And many times it never does. But when it happens regularly, that's not just a flag that's waving in your face. The second important point. Then when you're angry, it's how you express it. And the intention. So if the intention is to say, I'm upset about something, versus I want to hurt you, I want to punish you, I want to make you feel really bad, I want to break you down to pieces, not necessarily physically, because expression of anger is not only violent. You can be violent with your words as well. and you can say you are X, Y, Z, right? So often the intention is not I'm upset. The intention is I'm going to damage you with my words. And that's how we then know we're slipping out from like a normal everyday thing that we all have, me, all of us, into this regular thing where my intention is to break you down.
Right.
By making you feel, I'll punish you in some way. If not physically, with my words. Now, when that happens on a regular basis, so we spoke last week that there are many different forms of abuse. A show like this can't cover everything, but let's say, right? So a lot of times, women who are in abusive relationships are with men who basically structure the whole thing. What do I mean by that? So they need to isolate their partner. So slowly they'll start stopping them seeing their friends. They complain about the friends a lot. Your friends are bad influences. Not that friends are not always good influences. We must be honest about that. But there's like a global plan unfolding. Okay? Because the idea is to isolate the woman to make her feel then helpless. So you start stopping interactions with family members, with friends, and then the woman becomes more and more isolated. Then at that point, okay, you start breaking down her self-esteem by calling her names, by saying things like, nobody will want you. I'm the only one that will put up with you. You know, you're worthless, you're useless. I'm the one that look after you, nobody else will. Now, as you do it regularly, it's a chop, 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 to the point where then the woman feels virtually worthless and helpless and hopeless, and then gives up and accepts this as my life.
Gotcha. But the mistake often, and the worrying stats that you did mention is extremely worrying, but the mistake we often make in our country especially is that it only happens to women.
Yes.
This happens to men at the same time.
It happens to men, and I think we must put that out on the table, that not in the numbers, but so if somebody's watching and saying, but I'm the abused spouse, I'm a guy, that's true. There are definitely more and more cases coming up where men are coming forward. It's more embarrassing for a man to come forward and say, my wife hits me. Because his friends laugh.
Of course.
Or you go to the police station. I've had cases with this, and the police laugh at you. They call your names and they say, what's wrong with you? Why can't you, so now, so men feel embarrassed for different reasons to report. They demasculated, they emasculated, and the police laugh at them. And their friends laugh at them. So now what do? Right, you stuck. But it's a small percentage. It's certainly nowhere near the amount of men that abuse women.
Of course. In terms of last week, we mentioned something called trauma bond.
Yes.
You know, and how and when does this occur? Before we go to the break, maybe just set the tone and we can always continue.
So a trauma bond is a term used to describe the unhealthy relationship an abused person has with the abuser.
Right.
Okay, it's an unhealthy relationship. And so people then they say it's you bonded over your own trauma, and that's true. So the new understanding is that your brain seeks out patterns of familiarity. Okay, so your brain will look for what is familiar.
Right.
Not necessarily good or bad for you, but what is familiar, because your brain works on patterns. So if you grew up in an atmosphere where this was the regular occurrence, you simply download that software. Over the years, that gets turned into a YouTube video in your brain. We'll make it easy that way. And that becomes a software program. So as you grow up, your brain uses that as a program to tell you what kind of relationship you should be in. Not because it's good or bad, but because it's familiar. And then you end up in a relationship completely unconsciously there that often I'll say to my patients, so when did you feel like this? Oh, no, when I was growing up, this is what I had as well. So your brain seeks out familiarity, and then you end up being bonded with the abuser because it feels familiar. Now, it'll be important. You're not choosing it. Your brain selects the relationship because it's familiar. And familiarity, there's a strange safety, bizarrely, because it's recognizable. Okay, I know this. This I've seen my whole life. I know this.
And I think this is the worrying part where that comes in, because it's too close to comfort sometimes, too close to home. where, you know, the person goes through all of this all over again. And I suppose, you know, the sweat starts and the anxiety starts as well. And we're going to cover that a bit more after the break as well. We're chatting to Brother Rafiq Lockhat, who is a clinical psychologist, on Mental Health Mondays. At GBV, we're in the 16 Days of Activism campaign, and it's so important for shows like this to highlight what's happening in and around not just our country, but the world as well. Do stay tuned. We'll be back after the break. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. It's Mental Health Monday, where we're chatting about a very important topic called GBV. We all know the 16 Days of Activism campaign is still on. I think we're in the penultimate day. But we want programs like this to highlight what is really going on in our country. And back in studio, clinical psychologist Brother Rafiq Lockhat. Thanks so much once again for coming into studio. Before the break, we chatted about trauma bonding as well, and that was very interesting. But let's chat about some of the coping mechanisms that people can utilize, can implement to try and alleviate some of the issues.
So step one is to recognize that you're in an abusive relationship. That's the first step, because if you don't recognize it, you don't realize something has to be different.
Yeah.
That's step one. Step two is then to go for help. So there are different ways. So if you have old software, you will continue doing old things.
Right.
If you get new software in your brain, you can think and feel differently about the situation. Because remember, your old brain keeps you trapped in the same pattern. It's familiar. So I now use a therapy called brain working recursive therapy, BWRT. There's lots of psychologists and psychiatrists trained in it. Very fast, efficient, and cost-effective way. Basically reprogram your brain from all the old software that's keeping you locked in, to think and feel differently. Now, even if you're trapped in the relationship, either because of financial reasons, because of no jobs, because of the threat to kill you, or I often have people say, I'll kill the children if you leave me. These are real threats. That's very terrifying to a person to have that kind of threat. But you can still be, then through therapy, learn to handle it differently. In a way that doesn't endanger you, but for you to at least think differently, less fearfully, and kind of stay in the relationship, because for whatever reason you can't leave. And when the time is right, you'll feel empowered to leave. So we can get to that. So there's different ways. You can leave sometimes if you get the right circumstances. Other people, the circumstances don't allow. The kids are too young. But you're going to endure this. And so therapy can help you to not endure it, to enjoy it differently, to be in the relationship, but to think and feel differently about yourself. So when your husband says you're nothing and you're worthless and you whatever bad names, the old you goes, yes, he's right, I am worthless. But the new you with therapy will go, you'll think it, well, that's what you think, but I know that I'm worthwhile. So we start to change the person's self-esteem to think and feel differently about herself.
Gotcha.
And that'll be step one.
Right.
And then step two is like the standard things, you get an interdict, which fortunately, I think is starting to take off a little bit more. The police, I think, are under enormous pressure, to not send people away and say, sorry, it's domestic, we don't get involved. I think the top-end directive is you do get involved. Yeah. And because often you'll come for help, you won't get the help, and then the next thing, the person's killed, and then the family will say, but they went to that police station.
Correct. And
that commander said to her to go away. So I think people in police are looking more at how to step in.
Yeah, and I think to a large degree, some police stations are equipped with trauma counseling or trauma counselors to assist in the process as well.
And they have trauma rooms.
As well.
Okay. So that would be the one thing to do. The other thing, of course, is, so if men, and I do have some men that come in and say, look, I'm out of control.
Yeah.
So it's not true that men can't change. That's not true. Okay, but the man has to have the motivation to change. And some men do come in and say, I'm out of control, I need help, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's a good start. And others will just tell you straight, this is how I was raised, I'm going to continue doing that. So those ones can't be helped, but others can. Now, I've often thought about who has the most influence over men, for example, and that's usually their friends. So if men are watching and you have a friend who is abusing their partner or is rude to her in public and treats her badly, take him aside. Don't do it publicly. Say, and say, listen, I saw that. It's not cool. You really shouldn't talk to your wife like that. You're less likely to fight with your close friend than you are with anybody else. So if 2 or 3 friends take you aside and have a chat to you in a warm way and say, listen, dude, you need help. We've been watching you. You're really aggressive with your wife. We've seen you push her. And we're your friends. We want the best for you. We're not taking it for nothing. But really, you need help. And that's usually where people will say to me, my friends pointed out to me that my behavior is unacceptable. And my wife has been telling me, and I just thought she's nagging. And that's the famous word people use. They use the word nag as an excuse, to then become an abuse. But so friends, I found, can be very useful. Of course, if you're with friends who all do the same thing, then you encourage each other.
You're right.
Yeah, put her right. But there's usually one sensible friend who will recognize that you're behaving badly. And that friend can make a huge difference to whether change occurs or not.
I think it's great advice, and I think that's a way forward. That, it's a community as well, and we need to help each other. But more importantly, once we know all of this and, the advice that you've given and, people have taken the necessary steps, the healing and recovery part is also a journey on its own as well. Because it's that video that keeps getting played in and, over and over on repeat, that sometimes gets stuck in the victim's mind.
Right.
How do we get over that?
So the BWRT therapy can actually wipe that out.
Okay.
It's easy to do that these days. You can like delete those videos. You can do that. And you can put new videos in that are more empowering. Okay? So that is a good start. So it's not like the old days where you must talk for hours and hours and hours and then don't feel any. You feel like good in the session and you come out, you don't have the tools to deal with it. Okay, so the newer therapies like BWRT recognize that you can make it, because now we understand the brain much better.
Sure.
With the technology, so that'll be step 1, is to stop the bad videos playing. Step 2 is to put better software to help you cope with the situation. Step 3 often is to get help for the children. Because we don't realize how much children see and observe.
Yeah, but extended family that's living in the...
Extended family. And often we think the kids are asleep. They're not.
Yeah.
Their eyes are closed, but how can they not hear?
Of course.
And that I often see people as adults who will then vividly describe as age 3 and age 4 and age 5 what they heard, what they saw. And then their brains just download that bad memory. It downloads what they're feeling at the time. And then we know now that it never gets old. So those feelings never get old. And then that's how you then develop anxiety, generalized anxiety, panic attacks, for example. And when we work with them, we figure out that that's where they first downloaded that fear.
Yeah. And also, just one step back as well, self-medication. Sometimes people tend to want to dampen some of the stress and anxiety.
Numb it out.
Numb it down, basically.
Numb it down.
And self-medicate, because that's a real issue right there.
It's a real issue because sometimes you're stuck and all you want to do is just make it go away. And then your friend gives you something that was prescribed for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, we covered this in a previous episode as well.
Say, take this, worked for me. And then the dosage is wrong because your body size is wrong. Maybe you've got comorbid other issues, you're diabetic or high blood pressure. And then you're taking medication that works for your friends, but they don't have your conditions.
Correct.
But one understands the need to do that. Right? I just want to sleep. I can't, this playing in my head. I just want the bad feelings to go away. It's a very short solution. That's not the solution. That is a very temporary solution. It's like listening to a nice song to help you think differently. Then the song stops playing and then your reality is still there.
Yeah.
So self-medication is a very dangerous way to go, especially if you're taking prescription medicine that wasn't prescribed for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's totally, totally different according to your DNA mix as well. Rafiq, thanks so much. It's always a pleasure having you in studio. Where can people get hold of you if they would, really be interested?
RafiqLockhat.com.
RafiqLockhat.com.
But there are many psychologists in South Africa and psychiatrists who are trained in this BWRT method. So just go onto the web, just like Google up psychologists who practice this type of therapy, and they're all over the country.
Any last message in closing, especially about today's topic?
Yes, so I want to say that it's not all hopeless. The situation may seem hopeless, but it's not. There are ways to get out, and sometimes people just have to plan and wait. And often when the children are older, they say, Mom, okay, we're older now, we can buy a house, we can leave him. And sometimes the woman say, but who's going to take care of your dad? But Mom, we waited so long. And that's the trauma bond we spoke about sometimes.
Gotcha.
That even when you can leave, for some women, they still feel really sorry for the guy.
Yeah.
Because
Gotcha.
he had a bad life and he had upbringing. So, no, but Mom, we can go now. No more of this abuse. And they're saying, no, look after your dad, man.
Rafiq, thanks once again. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
And there we go. That's how we end today's episode on Hilaal Life, Mental Health Monday. From the Cape Town team, Sohail Barnes, Mohammed Parker, and myself, Luqmaan Shadrach. Have a great evening. Assalamu alaikum.